The SEAL unit huddled low inside the narrow pass. 6 men motionless as stones pressed against the cold canyon walls of Afghanistan's Maro Valley. Radio static crackled in their ears, the only sound besides their measured breathing. Master Chief Ryan Foster raised a clenched fist, signaling the team to freeze. His weathered face, carved by 20 years of war, betrayed nothing as he surveyed their situation. No way out. Enemy combatants advanced from 3 directions. The mission had changed from reconnaissance to survival in a heartbeat. Above them, storm clouds gathered over the Hindu Kush, killing any hope of air support. Their satellite communications had gone dark 12 minutes ago, would jam completely offline as if someone had thrown a switch. Sidewinder team, this is base. Report status. The voice in their headsets finally broke through, distorted and fading. Sidewinder, do you copy? Foster pressed his communication button. Base, this is Sidewinder. We are compromised. Request immediate. The transmission died mid-sentence. The familiar sensation of a trap closing around them settled in Foster's gut. He'd felt it before in this exact valley 13 years ago. Different team, same killing ground. He glanced at his second-in-command, Lieutenant Alex Reeves, whose eyes reflected the same grim calculation. 6 operators against what appeared to be 30 hostiles. Terrible odds, but SEALs had overcome worse. Then a sharp crack split the air. One enemy fighter dropped without a sound, followed by another. 3 more precision shots rang out in rapid succession. 5 bodies on the ground in 7 seconds. Chaos erupted among the enemy formation as fighters scrambled for cover, their coordinated advance dissolving into confusion. No one had expected fire from the ridge above a position military intelligence had deemed inaccessible. "Who the hell is up there?" Reeves hissed, scanning the towering cliff face to their north. Foster didn't need to look. His eyes remained fixed on his scope, voice dropping to a near whisper. "She's back." The distinctive signature of those shots was unmistakable. Not the sound of the rifle, but the precision, the timing, the selection of targets that instantly crippled the enemy's command structure. Foster had seen this pattern once before on a day he tried for 13 years to forget. 3 more shots rang out. 3 more bodies fell. "Sidewinder, pull back to position Echo," Foster commanded. "We've got Guardian Angel fire. Let's not waste it." As his team retreated through a narrow passage that had appeared blocked moments before, Foster allowed himself one glance toward the ridge they'd all been told was empty. Ridge 13. Nothing visible. No flash of a muzzle, no movement. Just the mountain itself, silent and watchful, delivering judgment from 3,500 meters away. Colonel James Morrison stood at the window of his office at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, watching the morning rain trace patterns on the glass. At 67, with silver hair cropped in the same military cut he'd worn for 45 years, Morrison was an anachronism, a living relic of conflicts most people only read about in history books. His right leg ached, as it always did when storms approached. A souvenir from Operation Desert Storm, 1991. His hand unconsciously moved to rub the old wound as he stared at the weather front moving in from the west. "You're thinking about Valkyrie again." The voice came from behind him. Morrison didn't turn. "Some ghosts never rest, Major Bradford." "It was 13 years ago, sir. And yet here we are sending another team into the same valley." Morrison finally faced his XO, Major Thomas Bradford, a capable officer who had served under him for 5 years. With the same communication protocols that failed last time. Bradford placed a folder on Morrison's desk. "The briefing for the emergency meeting is ready, sir. Director Hayes will be on the secure line in 20 minutes. Morrison nodded, his eyes drifting to a framed photograph on his office wall. 6 soldiers in mountain gear standing before a helicopter. Operation Valkyrie 2009. None of the faces were smiling. "Is she here?" Morrison asked. "Arrived last night. She's been assigned quarters in B block. Technical Analysis Division as requested." Morrison's expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Has she been briefed?" "Only that she's here to assist with terrain mapping and communications forensics. Nothing about Sidewinder team's situation." Morrison picked up the folder, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. "The latest, still dark. Last transmission was 18 hours ago. We've got satellites showing the ambush formation, but no eyes on our team's current position." The colonel's jaw tightened. "And our analyst, been in the mapping room since 0500, hasn't spoken to anyone, just working." Morrison closed the folder. Tell the director I'll take his call in the briefing room. And Bradford, sir, have our new analyst attend. Put her in the back. I want to see how she reacts. As Bradford left, Morrison returned to the window watching raindrops race down the glass, his mind drifting back to another rain-soaked day in the mountains of Afghanistan, to an operation that had vanished into those peaks, leaving nothing but silence and questions, and one survivor who had never told the full story. The Strategic Operations Center hummed with activity. 12 senior officers and analysts sat around a gleaming conference table, all attention focused on the large screens displaying satellite imagery of the Hindu Kush Mountains. Director William Hayes, a stern-faced man in his early 60s, addressed the room from a monitor at the head of the table. So we have a Tier 1 unit missing in the exact location where we lost Valkyrie Team 13 years ago, Hayes stated flatly. Is nobody else concerned about this pattern? Morrison stood at the opposite end of the table. That's precisely why I've activated Project Kestrel, sir. We believe the communication failure follows the same signature as 2009. This isn't coincidence. You think Phantom Cell has compromised our systems again, after all the upgrades? I think they never stopped, sir. They just went dormant, waiting. From her position at the back of the room, Sarah Leah Keller watched the exchange in silence. 30 years old with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, she appeared to be exactly what her file described, a technical analyst specializing in topographical mapping and communication forensics. Her expression revealed nothing as her eyes moved methodically between the satellite images and the faces of those discussing them. But beneath the table, her right hand was clenched so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. Colonel Morrison, Hayes continued, you have command authority for recovery operations. What's your assessment? Morrison straightened. Sidewinder team consists of 6 of our best operators. If they've gone dark, it's not by choice. The geographical and technical similarities to Operation Valkyrie cannot be ignored. I believe we're dealing with the same adversary using the same playbook. The difference, Hayes countered, is that Valkyrie was a reconnaissance team. Sidewinder is combat ready. They can fight their way out. With respect, sir, so could Valkyrie. 5 decorated special operators with combat experience in 3 theaters. It didn't matter. A heavy silence fell over the room. And your recommendation, Hayes finally asked. Implementation of Project Kestrel effective immediately. Full spectrum analysis of all communication channels. And preparation of a quick reaction force for extraction once we have confirmation of Sidewinder's location. Hayes nodded. Approved. Keep me updated. The screen went dark. As the meeting dispersed, Morrison made his way toward the back of the room where Leah sat still focused on her tablet. He stopped beside her chair, not looking down. Ms. Keller, a moment of your time. She rose without comment, following him into an adjacent secure room. Once the door closed, Morrison turned to face her directly for the first time. I requested you specifically for this operation, he said without preamble. So my transfer order indicated Colonel. Her voice was professional, controlled, with no hint of a German accent despite her dual citizenship. Though it didn't specify why a terrain specialist would be needed for a communications security review. Morrison studied her face, the careful neutrality, the measured responses, looking for cracks in the facade. You've reviewed the Marrow Valley topography. Since 0500 this morning, sir. And, she held his gaze, and Ridge 13 still doesn't appear on any official maps despite providing the only viable overwatch position for the entire valley floor. Something changed in Morrison's expression, a subtle shift only someone who knew him well would notice. You've worked in Afghanistan before, Ms. Keller. I've analyzed multiple theaters, Colonel. That's not what I asked. Leah's expression remained perfectly composed. My file is available for your review, sir. My deployments are listed there. Morrison almost smiled. Indeed they are. Tell me, what do you make of Sidewinder's situation? Now Leah moved to the digital map on the wall, activating it with a touch. The Marrow Valley appeared in 3 dimensions, a winding gash through unforgiving mountains. They entered here. She indicated a narrow pass, her fingers moving with surprising familiarity across the terrain. Standard insertion point, but the valley has changed since their maps were updated. Springmelt has altered this ravine, creating a natural funnel here. Anyone monitoring these ridgelines would spot them immediately. And the communication failure, not equipment malfunction. Her answer came too quickly, too certainly. She caught herself adding, based on preliminary analysis, the pattern suggests targeted interference with specific frequency ranges. Morrison watched her hands as she manipulated the map, steady, confident, not the hands of someone who had spent their career behind a desk. I lost friends in that valley, Ms. Keller. For the first time, her composure wavered almost imperceptibly. Many did, sir. I want you to review all communication logs from Valkyrie and compare them with Sidewinder's last transmission. Find the pattern. Find who's responsible. Yes, sir. As she turned to leave, Morrison added, and Ms. Keller. She paused at the door. The armory is off limits to technical personnel. Just so we're clear. Her back stiffened slightly. Understood, Colonel. As the door closed behind her, Morrison returned to the map she'd left open, studying the valley and its surroundings. His eyes fixed on Ridge 13, an imposing peak offering a commanding view of the entire valley floor, a position that, according to official reports, was inaccessible. His hand moved to his leg, feeling the old wound throb with the coming storm. You never left, did you? He whispered to the empty room. The technical analysis lab was empty when Leah entered, just as she preferred. She locked the door, initiated the secure terminal, and pulled up the classified files on Operation Valkyrie. Photos appeared on screen, 6 operators in mountain gear, the same image Morrison kept on his wall. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard momentarily before she opened another file, the communications log from 13 years ago. Line after line of transmissions until they abruptly ended at 0347 hours on April 12, 2009. Leah closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself 3 seconds of remembered pain before refocusing. Next, she opened Sidewinder's most recent transmissions. Different team, different mission, 13 years apart. She ran them through specialized analysis software, searching for patterns, anomalies, anything connecting the two failures. After 20 minutes, she found it. Both teams had experienced the same sequential communication degradation. First, satellite uplinks failed, then long-range radio, finally squad-level tactical communications. Not the pattern of environmental interference or equipment failure. This was deliberate, systematic communication isolation. She checked the timestamps against known phantom cell activities. The correlation was unmistakable. Leah reached for her secure phone, then hesitated. This information needed to reach Morrison immediately, but sharing it would raise questions about how she had identified the pattern so quickly. Questions she wasn't prepared to answer. Her attention shifted to the 3-dimensional terrain model still displayed on her screen. Most analysts saw it as lines and grids, a mathematical representation of physical space. Leah saw it differently. To her, the mountain breathed. She could feel the way wind would channel through that narrow pass, how temperature gradients would affect visibility at different times of day, where shadows would provide concealment, which rocks would shift underfoot, giving away a position. Leah zoomed in on Ridge 13, rotating the image to examine the northern approach, a route absent from all official maps. Her fingers traced the invisible path that had saved her life 13 years ago. The same path that might now save Sidewinder team. A notification appeared on her screen, Colonel Morrison requesting her presence at the tactical review in 30 minutes. She quickly closed the classified files, erased her search history, and reset the system to standard analysis parameters. As she gathered her materials, her eyes drifted to the window, measuring angles and distances reflexively. Old habits impossible to break. The rain had intensified, driving against the glass in patterns that reminded her of another storm, another mountain. She allowed herself one moment of clarity, dropping the carefully maintained facade. Her expression-hardened eyes focusing with an intensity no technical analyst should possess. Then just as quickly the mask returned. She adjusted her uniform, transformed back into the quiet specialist that no one ever noticed, and headed for the door. Team Sidewinder's equipment room buzzed with nervous energy as the operators prepared for deployment. Master Chief Ryan Foster supervised the final checks, his expression grim as he inspected each piece of gear with methodical precision. This terrain eats the unprepared, he told his team, voice low, but carrying. Double-check everything. Triple-check your comms. Jason Wade, the team's leader at 38, nodded as he adjusted his tactical vest. Intel says we'll have clear weather for insertion this time. No repeat of last month's cluster. Intel said Ridge 13 was inaccessible too, Foster replied. until someone started dropping tangos from up there yesterday. The room quieted. The mysterious sniper had become a topic of intense speculation. 6 men owed their lives to those precision shots, but no friendly forces had been registered in the area. No mission files, no call signs, nothing. Kate Vega, 35, the team's weapons specialist, looked up from her rifle assembly. Command still has no idea who was up there. Official word is we caught a lucky break, Wade answered. Probably some local militia who didn't like Phantom Cell moving into their territory. Foster remained silent. He knew better. Those weren't the shots of some untrained local with a salvaged rifle. Those were the work of a ghost he thought had vanished years ago. The door opened and Colonel Morrison entered, followed by a woman no one recognized. The team immediately stood at attention. At ease, Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. Final briefing in 5, but first I want to introduce your new technical support. This is Sarah Keller, Advanced Topographical Analysis. She'll be providing real-time terrain mapping and communication support for this operation. Leah nodded to the team, her expression professional but reserved. Gentlemen, Wade eyed her skeptically. With respect, Colonel, we've already got our technical package prepared. We deploy in 3 hours. Your package is based on outdated geological surveys, Leah replied, her voice calm but firm. The spring melt has altered key features in your insertion zone. I've prepared an updated model. She opened her tablet, displaying a 3-dimensional map of the target area. The level of detail was extraordinary, showing minute changes in the landscape that wouldn't appear on standard surveys. How recent is this data? Foster asked, studying the display with newfound interest. I compiled it this morning from multiple sources, Leah answered, not meeting his eyes. Satellite drone reconnaissance and historical weather pattern analysis. Foster's attention sharpened. Something in her manner triggered his instincts, the way she handled the map, the confidence in her assessments. This wasn't someone who had merely studied the terrain. You've been there, he said quietly, more statement than question. The room went still. Leah's eyes finally met Foster's, a silent communication passing between them. I've analyzed similar mountain formations, she replied carefully. The Morrow Valley has distinctive features comparable to other ranges in the region. Morrison watched the exchange with interest, noting Foster's reaction. The Master Chief had spent more time in those mountains than anyone else in the room. If he sensed something unusual about their new analyst, it was worth paying attention to. Ms. Keller will be your direct link to command during this operation, Morrison stated, breaking the tension. She'll monitor your communications and provide real-time intelligence. I expect full cooperation. Yes, sir, Wade responded, though his expression remained doubtful. As the team returned to their preparations, Morrison pulled Foster aside. You know something, a Master Chief? Foster glanced toward Leah, who was now explaining terrain features to Vega. Just a feeling, sir. Can't place it yet. Trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long. Morrison lowered his voice further. But keep it to yourself for now. That's an order. Foster nodded, his eyes still on the quiet analyst, who handled their tactical maps with unexpected familiarity. After Morrison departed, Leah finished her briefing and moved toward the exit. As she passed Foster, he spoke without looking up from his equipment. That ridge you mentioned, the one not on any maps, how high would you say it is? Leah paused, knowing exactly which ridge he meant. Approximately 13,450 feet at its peak, nearly vertical on the southern approach. Making it impossible to access, Foster added, testing her. Impossible for most, Leah corrected, then caught herself. According to topographical analysis. Foster finally looked up at her. But not for everyone. Their eyes locked briefly. Recognition flickered between them, a shared secret unspoken. Be careful out there, Master Chief, she said quietly. The mountains remember everything. With that, she was gone, leaving Foster with an unsettling sense that he had just spoken to someone who knew far more about Ridge 13 than any analyst should. The armory at Fort Liberty housed one of the most comprehensive collections of specialized weaponry in the U.S. military. Sergeant Major Frank Chambers, a 27-year veteran with a perpetual scowl, guarded his domain with legendary strictness. No one touched his weapons without proper clearance, proper paperwork, and his personal approval, which made it all the more unusual when he found Leah Keller standing in the precision rifle section, staring at a dusty case in the far corner. Can I help you, ma'am? His tone made it clear that he expected her to be lost. Leah turned seemingly unsurprised by his approach. Just familiarizing myself with the equipment Sidewinder team will be using, Sergeant Major. Chambers crossed his arms. Technical personnel don't generally need weapon familiarization. Communication failures could be linked to equipment interference. I need to understand all devices the team will carry. Her explanation was reasonable, but Chambers remained skeptical. He followed her gaze to the case she'd been examining. That's not Sidewinder equipment. That's an M14 EBR Mod 0. We don't issue those anymore except for specialized historical training. Leah nodded. I noticed. Seems well maintained despite its age. I maintain all my weapons, ma'am. Pride crept into his voice. That one's got history. Afghanistan 2009. One of the few pieces we recovered from Operation Valkyrie. Something changed in Leah's expression, subtle but present. Recovered, I thought all equipment was lost. Most was. This came back with the recovery team. Founded on Ridge 13, if you believe that. Nobody knows how it got there. He shook his head. Strange thing is, it still works perfectly. I test fire it every 6 months myself. May I, Leah asked, gesturing toward the case. Chambers hesitated, then shrugged. You can look, but handling requires different clearance. He unlocked the display, stepping back as Leah examined the weapon without touching it. Her eyes moved over every component with remarkable focus. The scope's been modified, she observed. Good eye, Chambers said, surprised. Custom adjustment for extreme elevation shooting, not standard issue. And the stock has been shortened slightly. Now Chambers was genuinely impressed. Only by 3/4 of an inch. Nobody ever notices that. Leah stepped back from the display. Thank you, Sergeant Major. This has been educational. As she turned to leave, Chambers called after her. You know rifles, ma'am. That's not common in technical staff. She paused at the door. My father taught me the basics. He believed in being well-rounded. He served, yes, he died in Desert Storm. Chambers straightened respectfully. I was there. Tough campaign. So I've heard, Leah replied, then added, the modification to that scope, it's for shooting downward at extreme angles, isn't it? From high elevation? That's right. How'd you know? Just an educated guess. She nodded politely. Good day, Sergeant Major. After she left, Chambers returned to the rifle, studying it with renewed interest. Something about the woman's observations bothered him. Not wrong, just too right, too specific. He pulled out his logbook, checking the last entry for the weapon. 3 months ago, someone had requisitioned it for technical inspection. The signature was illegible, but the authorization code belonged to Colonel Morrison himself. The evening briefing was winding down when Morrison noticed Leah slip quietly from the room. The rest of the staff remained focused on final mission preparations for Sidewinder's extraction operation, scheduled to deploy in 6 hours. But Morrison had been watching their technical analyst throughout the meeting, noting her increasing tension as satellite imagery of the Morrow Valley was discussed. Continue without me, he told Major Bradford, then followed Leah into the hallway. She was moving with purpose, not toward her quarters or the technical lab, but toward the east exit of the building. Morrison maintained his distance, tracking her through the facility until she pushed through the doors leading outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the night air cool and damp. Morrison watched from inside as Leah crossed the open area between buildings, heading not toward any official facility, but to the perimeter fence line. There, partially obscured by shadows, she stopped and stared outward, seemingly measuring angles against the distant tree line. For 10 minutes, she remained motionless, performing what appeared to be mental calculations as she surveyed the landscape. Then, with sudden purpose, she turned and headed toward the communications building. Morrison moved to intercept her using a parallel path. He reached the entrance just as she approached. Beautiful night for a walk, Ms. Keller, he said, startling her. She recovered quickly. Colonel, I was just clearing my head before returning to work. By measuring distances and angles along our perimeter, her expression remained neutral. Old habits. I find it helps me think. Interesting habit for a technical analyst. Leah met his gaze directly. Is there something you want to ask me, Colonel? Morrison studied her face in the dim light. Why are you really here, Miss Keller? I was assigned to Project Kestrel at your request, sir. That's not an answer. A moment of tension stretched between them. Finally, Leah spoke, her voice lower, more genuine than he'd heard before. You know why I'm here, Colonel. The same reason you requested me specifically. Sidewinder team is in trouble and you need someone who understands that valley. And you understand it better than most, Morrison stated, despite never officially serving there. Leah's composure didn't waver. My technical analysis is based on comprehensive data integration. Morrison took a step closer. I've known about you for years, watching your career from a distance. The quiet specialist who always happens to be stationed near crisis zones, always filing perfect reports while somehow never appearing in operational photographs. I'm not sure what you're implying, sir. I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you that I know. His voice dropped to near whisper. Falcon 327. The name hit her like a physical blow. For a fraction of a second, her carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing something fierce beneath. That designation was retired, she said, each word precise. Was it because someone with remarkable skill was on Ridge 13 yesterday saving my operators with shots that 99% of snipers couldn't make? Morrison's eyes hardened. The same ridge where we found an M14 13 years ago after Valkyrie disappeared. Leah remained silent. I lost 5 good people in that valley, Morrison continued. 5 friends, never found their bodies, never knew exactly what happened. Just fragments of satellite imagery showing an ambush, then nothing. Except for a rifle on a ridge that should have been inaccessible. I've reviewed the file, Leah said carefully. The official conclusion was equipment failure combined with environmental factors. That's what the report says. What do you say? The directness of the question hung in the air between them. Leah glanced toward the communications building, then back to Morrison. I say that Sidewinder team needs our help, Colonel, and discussing ancient history won't provide it. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Report to the Tactical Operations Center at 500. I want you monitoring all communications personally when they move out. Yes, sir. As she walked away, Morrison called after her. One more thing, Ms. Keller. She stopped but didn't turn. If you need access to any equipment at all, you have my authorization. Code Alpha 7 Delta 327. She stiffened at the code, which incorporated her old designation. That won't be necessary, Colonel. Let's hope not, Morrison replied quietly, but hope isn't a strategy. After she disappeared inside, Morrison looked up at the night sky where stars were beginning to appear as clouds dispersed. Somewhere in Afghanistan, 6 of his men were fighting to stay alive, trapped in the same valley that had consumed Valkyrie team 13 years earlier. Only this time they might have a guardian angel, if she chose to reveal herself. Major Bradford hurried through the corridor, his face tense as he approached Morrison's office. He entered without knocking, an unprecedented breach of protocol call that told the colonel everything he needed to know before a word was spoken. Sidewinder's moving, Bradford said, confirming Morrison's suspicion. They've broken cover and are attempting to reach extraction point Echo. Morrison was on his feet instantly. Who authorized this? The QRF isn't in position yet. No authorization, sir. They're running dark. We only know because of satellite thermal imaging. Communications are still offline. Get to the TOC, now. They strode rapidly to the Tactical Operations Center, where a team of analysts was already tracking heat signatures moving through the Morrow Valley. Leah sat at a monitoring station, her focus absolute as she tracked multiple data feeds simultaneously. Report, Morrison demanded. A tactical analyst pointed to the main screen. Sidewinder appears to be executing a fighting retreat along this ridgeline. They've got hostiles in pursuit, at least 20 heat signatures. They're outgunned and outmanned. Where's our QRF? Still 90 minutes from insertion, sir. Weather's delaying the transports. Morrison studied the thermal images, watching 6 distinct signatures moving in tactical formation while a larger group pursued them through the valley. Ms. Keller, your assessment, he asked, turning to Leah. She didn't look up from her station. They're heading for the wrong extraction point. Echo is compromised. How could you possibly know that? Bradford challenged. Leah's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up a different satellite view. Phantom Cell has established positions here, here, and here. They're waiting for Sidewinder to enter the clearing. Morrison leaned closer. Those positions don't show on thermal, because they're using cold weather tactics, thermal dampening tarps over fighting positions. Old Soviet technique. The room fell silent, all eyes on the quiet analyst who had just revealed knowledge no technical specialist should possess. Morrison straightened. Recalibrate satellites to penetration mode, focus on those coordinates. Minutes later, the enhanced imaging confirmed Leah's assessment. Hidden fighting positions, surrounded extraction point echo, an invisible net waiting to close around Sidewinder team. My God, Bradford whispered. They're walking into a slaughter. Can we warn them? Morrison asked, knowing the answer. Auditive, sir. All communication channels are still compromised. Morrison turned to Leah, who was now standing, her attention fixed on a different section of the map. Miss Keller, thoughts? She pointed to a narrow pass 2 kilometers east of Sidewinder's position. If they reach this point, they could divert to secondary extraction at Whiskey. Terrain provides cover from those ambush positions. But they don't know about the ambush, Bradford argued. They'll continue to echo as planned. Leah's eyes met Morrison's, a silent question passing between them. They need to be warned, Morrison said quietly. Yes, sir, they do. Her voice had changed subtly, an edge of determination replacing the professional detachment. Options. Bradford shook his head. Without communications, we have no way to— There is one way, Leah interrupted, her focus still on the map. But it would require someone on the ground, someone in position to signal them. Which we don't have, Bradford insisted. Nearest assets are with the QRF, still 90 minutes out. Morrison held Leah's gaze, understanding passing between them. Major Bradford, I need to speak with Ms. Keller privately. Continue monitoring Sidewinder's movement and alert me of any changes. He led Leah to a small conference room adjacent to the TOC, securing the door behind them. You know Await, he stated once they were alone. Yes. Tell me. Leah hesitated, then spoke with quiet intensity. Ridge 13 provides line of sight to their current position. A signal from there could redirect them. Ridge 13 is 48 hours away for a conventional team, Morrison countered, even if we had communications with our assets. It's 7 hours by helicopter to forward operating base Condor, then 6 hours on foot to the ridge for someone who knows the route. Morrison studied her. Someone like you. She didn't deny it. I can reach them in time. You're asking me to authorize an off-books operation, sending a technical analyst into a hot zone based on your claim to know a secret route up an inaccessible mountain. His tone was skeptical, but his eyes told a different story. He was giving her the chance to reveal herself. I'm not asking for authorization, Colonel. Leah's voice had fully transformed, now the carefully constructed persona falling away. I'm telling you I can save your men. The only question is whether you'll provide transport to Foboa B Condor or if I need to find my own way there. For a moment, Morrison was silent, weighing decades of protocol against the lives of 6 operators. Wipe out, he finally asked. Why expose yourself now after all these years of staying hidden? Leah's expression softened slightly. You know why? The same reason you've been protecting me since Valkyrie. Some debts can never be repaid, but we still try. Morrison reached a decision. I'll have a helicopter ready in 30 minutes. Unmarked. No flight plan. As far as anyone here is concerned, you're taking personal leave for a family emergency. Thank you, sir. As she turned to go, Morrison added, Sergeant Major Chambers has something that might help you. I authorized its release an hour ago. Leah paused. The M14, thought you might want an old friend along for the ride. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Some relationships never die. Just make sure my operators don't either. Morrison's voice grew heavy with emotion he rarely displayed. And Leah, this time come back with them. Is that an order, Colonel? The only one that matters. In the armory, Sergeant Major Chambers waited with a hard-shell case resting on the counter. His expression registered no surprise when Leah entered wearing tactical gear instead of her analyst's uniform. Colonel said you might need this, he stated, pushing the case toward her. Inside lay the M14 EBR, cleaned and ready, alongside a custom tactical scope and ammunition. You knew, Leah said, checking the weapon with practiced hands. Suspected. Pieces never quite fit with your official story. Chambers watched her hands move over the rifle with familiar precision. That weapon only ever worked right for one person. Wouldn't zero properly for anyone else no matter what we tried. Leah looked up from her inspection. Weapons remember their owners, Sergeant Major. So do mountains, I hear. He pushed a small leather pouch across the counter. Found these with it. thought they might belong with the rifle. Inside the pouch were 7 brass casings, each engraved with a different set of coordinates. Weather report says clear skies over the Hindu Kush tonight, Chambers added casually. Good visibility, good hunting conditions. Leah pocketed the casings. I never hunt, Sergeant Major. No, what do you call it then? She closed the case, shouldering it along with her pack. Keeping promises. As she headed for the door, Chambers called after her. Those men you're going after, they're good operators. Best I've trained. Then they deserve to come home. Like Valkyrie deserved to. The question wasn't accusatory, just somber. Leah paused, her back still to Masim. I couldn't save them. Not all of them. But you tried. Chambers nodded to himself. Sometimes that's all we get. This time will be different, Leah said, and there was something in her voice, a steel certainty that made the veteran sergeant believe her. Falcon flies again, he said softly. Leah turned, meeting his eyes one last time. Falcon never stopped flying, Sergeant. She just flew where no one was looking. With that, she was gone, moving through the shadows toward the waiting helicopter, carrying a weapon that had once made impossible shots from an impossible ridge and was about to do so again. Behind her, Fort Liberty continued its rhythmic military precision, unaware that a ghost from its past had just emerged to confront the same enemy that had claimed her team 13 years before. And high above Afghanistan, Ridge 13 waited in silent witness, ready to reveal its secrets once more. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through night skies over Afghanistan, flying without lights at dangerously low altitude. Inside, Leah sat alone, except for the 2-man crew who had been briefed only that they were transporting a high-value intelligence asset to Phoebe Condor. Neither pilot asked questions about the rifle case secured between her boots or the tactical gear that no analyst should possess. 20 minutes to drop point, the pilot's voice crackled through her headset. Weather front moving in from the north. Might get rough. Leah nodded, her mind already mapping the approach to Ridge 13. The coming storm would provide cover but complicate the climb. She'd need every minute of the 6-hour window Morrison had calculated. Through the helicopter's window, she watched moonlight glint off distant peaks. The Hindu Kush, graveyard of empires, keeper of secrets. Her fingers unconsciously traced the scar running along her collarbone, a permanent reminder of the last time she'd walked these mountains. The crew chief glanced back at her. First time in country. Something like that, Leah replied, not taking her eyes off the approaching mountains. Phoebe Condor appeared as a collection of lights nestled in a valley, one of the last remaining American outposts in the region. The helicopter descended rapidly, touching down in a swirl of dust. Leah was on the ground before the rotor stopped turning, moving with purpose toward a nondescript supply building at the edge of the base. Inside it, a grizzled warrant officer waited as Morrison had arranged. You must be the package, he said without preamble, eyeing her civilian tactical gear. Colonel said you'd need local transport. No questions asked. That's right. He gestured toward an aging Russian motorcycle parked in the shadows. Not much to look at, but she'll get you to the Northern Valley approach. After that, you're on foot. It's enough, Leah said, securing her rifle case and pack to the bike. One more thing. The warrant officer handed her a satellite phone. Secure line. 1 number programmed. Colonel's orders: check in when you reach the ridge or if you abort. Leah pocketed the phone. I won't be aborting. Never said you would. He studied her with the calculating eyes of someone who had seen enough special operations to recognize the real thing. Whatever you're doing out there, good hunting. She kick-started the motorcycle, the engine growling to life. Not hunting, she corrected, echoing her earlier words to Chambers. Keeping promises. Without another word, she roared out of the supply building, past the base perimeter, and into the darkness of a country that had already taken everything from her once before. Back at Fort Liberty, Colonel Morrison stood alone in the Tactical Operations Center, watching the slow movement of thermal signatures across satellite imagery of the Morrow Valley. Sidewinder team continued their fighting retreat, still unaware of the ambush awaiting them at Extraction Point Echo. The door opened and Major Bradford entered, his expression troubled. Sir, I've been reviewing the deployment logs. Analyst Keller signed out on emergency leave 2 hours ago. Her transport requisition shows she's headed to Bagram Air Base. Morrison didn't look away from the screen. Family emergency. Her father's German relatives, I believe. Sir, with respect, her father died in Desert Storm, and transport to Bagram requires my authorization, which I never gave. Now Morrison turned his face impassive. Are you suggesting I bypassed proper channels, Major? Bradford hesitated. I'm suggesting we have an analyst with no combat experience, apparently heading into a war zone at the exact moment we have an operational crisis. Your concern is noted. Colonel, who is she, really? Morrison considered the question, weighing decades of military discipline against the need for a trusted officer to understand what was happening. Sit down, Major. He moved to a secure terminal, entered his command codes, and brought up a classified file. What I'm about to show you exists in only 3 copies, mine Director Hayes's and one in a vault at Langley. The screen displayed a mission brief, Operation Valkyrie 2009. 6 operators deployed for high-altitude reconnaissance in the Morrow Valley region. I've seen the Valkyrie files, Bradford said. All operators lost, bodies never recovered. That's the official version. Morrison entered another code revealing a sealed addendum. This is what really happened. Bradford leaned forward, reading with increasing disbelief. Sir, this says 1 operator survived. Designated Falcon 327. A sniper, the best I've ever seen. Morrison's voice took on a reverent quality. 6 days alone on the mountain after her team was ambushed. No extraction possible. Enemy forces hunting her. She not only survived, but managed to complete the mission objective. But the name is redacted. For her protection. Phantom Cell has been hunting Falcon ever since. They've killed 3 operators they mistakenly believed were her. Bradford looked up sharply. And Keller is Falcon. She was 24 during Valkyrie. Special operations qualified, but officially assigned to intelligence support. Perfect cover for high-value reconnaissance for him. And now, Morrison closed the file. Now she's the only person alive who knows how to reach Ridge 13 in time to save our men. You sent her back, Bradford said, understanding dawning. And alone. She was always going back, Major. I just made it official. Bradford was silent for a moment, processing the implications. If Phantom Cell realizes who she is, they won't capture her. Morrison's certainty was absolute. Not alive. The satellite feed updated showing Sidewinder team moving closer to the ambush point. Less than 3 hours remained before they would reach it. Can she make it in time? Bradford asked quietly. Morrison studied the mountainous terrain separating Leah's last known position from Ridge 13. If anyone can, it's her. The motorcycle took Leah as far as the foothills before the terrain became impassable. She concealed the bike and continued on foot, moving with the efficient pace of someone intimately familiar with mountain travel. The night air grew colder as she climbed, her breath fogging in front of her face. The approaching storm front brought gusting winds that would complicate shooting conditions, but also mask her movement from many watchers. She adjusted her pace accordingly, conserving energy for the final ascent. 3 hours into the journey, she reached a narrow ravine unmarked on any military map. To most eyes, it appeared to be a dead end. Leah moved confidently to a seemingly solid rock face and located a nearly invisible crevice just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Beyond lay the hidden route to Ridge 13. As she navigated the twisting path upward, memories surfaced unbidden. The last time she had used this route, she'd been wounded, dehydrated, and hunted. 6 days alone in these mountains had stripped her down to raw survival instinct. Every step had been a battle not just against the elements, but against despair. Now she moved with purpose, her body remembering what her mind tried to forget. Each handhold, each treacherous crossing came to her without conscious thought, muscle memory guiding her up the impossible climb. 4 hours in the storm hit in full force. Driving snow reduced visibility to meters, and the temperature plummeted. Leah paused briefly to add a thermal layer beneath her tactical gear, then continued upward. The conditions that would stop most climbers were her allies now providing cover for the final approach. At the 5-hour mark, she reached a vertical rock face that represented the last major obstacle. 40 meters of near-sheer cliff separated her from the ridge above. Without specialized climbing equipment, it would be impossible for most. Leah studied the face, then began to climb, finding invisible holds where the rock had weathered just enough to support her weight. She moved methodically, each placement tested before committing. One mistake here meant death. Halfway up, disaster struck. A handhold crumbled under her grip, sending her swinging precariously from one arm. For a heart-stopping moment, she dangled over the abyss, the weight of her rifle case threatening to pull her off the mountain. In that suspended moment, a voice from the past echoed in her mind. The mountain doesn't care if you live or die. Only you do, so make it care. Roger Hollister, the man who had trained her, the first to fall when Valkyrie was ambushed. With a grunt of effort, Leah swung her body and found a new hold, stabilizing herself against the cliff face. She continued upward, ignoring the burning in her shoulders and the blood now seeping from torn fingertips. 20 minutes later, she pulled herself onto Ridge 13. The storm raged around her as she crawled away from the edge, finding shelter in the same rock outcropping she had used 13 years before. The flat stone surface, protected from the wind, had served as her sniper's nest during those desperate days. It looked exactly as she had left it. Leah unclasped the rifle case, removing the M14 with reverent hands. The weapon felt alive, somehow awakening to her touch after years of separation. She assembled it with practiced efficiency, each component sliding into place as if no time had passed. Next came the scope, a custom piece that had been modified for this exact position on this exact mountain. She secured it to the rifle and began the ritual of preparation every sniper knows by heart. Check, adjust, verify. Leave nothing to chance. As she worked, the storm began to ease, revealing glimpses of the valley floor thousands of meters below. In the pre-dawn light, she could make out movement Sidewinder teams still hours from the ambush point, but moving steadily toward it. Leah set up her position, anchoring herself against the wind that still gusted across the ridge. Through her scope, she studied the terrain between Sidewinder's current position and the killing zone awaiting them. They needed to change course, but without communications, they had no way of knowing the danger. She had to signal them, somehow create an unmistakable warning that would redirect them to the secondary extraction point. Leah considered her options. A shot close enough to be heard but far enough not to be threatening might alert them, but in the wind they might miss it. Multiple shots risked revealing her position to Phantom Cell forces. Then she saw it. A rock outcropping overlooking the path Sidewinder would take in the next hour, large enough to create a significant obstacle if it collapsed onto the trail. A precision shot to the supporting base would trigger a rock slide blocking their planned route and forcing them to divert. Leah calculated the distance, 740 meters. A nearly impossible shot for most snipers, made worse by gusting winds and poor light. But this was why she had come. She settled into position, controlling her breathing as she had been taught. 5 breaths to center, 3 to aim, 1 to decide. The crosshairs settled on the precise point where the rock face would be most vulnerable. She adjusted for wind distance, temperature, and the slight curvature of the earth at this range. Then she squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the sound echoing across the valley. Through her scope, she watched the impact point fracture, then collapse. Exactly as calculated, the rock face began to crumble, sending tons of stone cascading onto the path below. Sidewinder would have no choice but to divert east away from the ambush. But the shot had announced her presence. In the valley below, she saw movement as Phantom Cell forces responded to the unexpected threat. They would be scanning the ridges now, looking for the source. Leah quickly repositioned, moving to a different vantage point 20 meters away. The next phase would be more dangerous. If Phantom Cell forces moved to intercept Sidewinder on their new route, she would need to intervene more directly. As she settled into her new position, a memory surfaced not of combat, but of the quiet moments before Operation Valkyrie launched. Roger Hollister, her mentor and team leader, had taken her aside for a final word. "Remember why we're here, kid. Not for glory, not for country, for each other. That's the only mission that matters in the end." Hours later, he took a bullet meant for her. His last words whispered as life left him, "Make it count." Leah focused her scope on the valley below where 6 men she had never met were fighting to survive. "I will," she whispered to the mountain wind. "I promise." In the Tactical Operations Center at Fort Liberty, Morrison and Bradford watched with growing tension as Sidewinder approached the ambush point. The satellite feed updated every 90 seconds, creating a stuttering tableau of impending disaster. "They're maintaining course," Bradford said grimly. 15 minutes until they reached the killing zone. Morrison stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, years of command keeping his anxiety hidden. "Keep monitoring." The satellite feed refreshed. Suddenly, Bradford leaned forward. "Sir, landslide on their approach route." The screen showed a massive debris field now blocking Sidewinder's path. Natural, Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer. Bradford checked the geological sensors. No seismic activity reported. This was deliberate. As they watched, Sidewinder's heat signatures paused, then began moving in a new direction east away from the ambush. They're diverting to secondary extraction, Bradford realized. Whiskey Point instead of Echo. She made it, Morrison said quietly. Right on time. Bradford studied the mountain range on the tactical display. No heat signature on Ridge 13. How is she masking her position? She's not on thermal equipment. Morrison pointed to a different section of the map. Switch to topographical overlay. When Bradford complied, Morrison indicated a shadowed area on the western face of Ridge 13. Old Soviet technique, use the mountain's cold spots. Temperature differential mass, body heat from satellite imaging. That's not something they teach at analyst school, Bradford said slowly. No, it's something you learn when you spend 6 days hiding from people trying to kill you. Morrison checked his watch. Sidewinder will reach extraction point Whiskey in approximately 3 hours. Phantom Cell will adapt their ambush once they realize the team has changed course. And Keller will do what she does best. The satellite feed refreshed again. Multiple heat signatures were now moving from the original ambush site, spreading out to intercept Sidewinder on their new route. Phantom Cell is mobile, Bradford reported. At least 20 combatants closing from the north and west. Morrison watched the unfolding tactical situation with the practiced eye of someone who had seen countless operations, both successful and failed. Major, what's the one thing every ambush requires to succeed? Bradford considered the question. Surprise. And what happens when the ambushers become the ambushed? Before Bradford could answer, the satellite feed refreshed. One of the Phantom Cell heat signatures disappeared. Then another. A third vanished seconds later. What we're about to witness, Morrison said with grim satisfaction, is a master class. Leah tracked the Phantom Cell fighters through her scope as they moved to establish a new ambush position. They were good, disciplined, and tactically sound. They maintained proper intervals, used terrain for cover, and advanced with clear objectives. But they had one critical disadvantage. They didn't know they were being watched. Through years of disciplined practice, Leah had developed an almost supernatural ability to predict movement across terrain. She didn't aim at where a target was, but where they would be in the crucial seconds between deciding to fire and the bullet's impact. Her first shot dropped the point man silently, the sound of the rifle lost in the mountain wind. By the time his companions realized he was down, Leah had already relocated, following the sniper's cardinal rule, never fire twice from the same position. Her second target was the radio operator, identifiable by his equipment and position in the formation. As he fell, she targeted their heavy weapons specialist, then the apparent squad leader. 4 shots, 4 kills, no wasted rounds. The remaining fighters scattered, suddenly aware they were being hunted from above. They took cover, scanning the ridge lines with their optics. But Ridge 13, with its unique topography and harsh weather conditions, created a perfect firing platform that rendered conventional counter-sniper tactics useless. Leah continued her systematic disruption of the Phantom Cell force. She didn't need to eliminate every fighter, just enough to destroy their command structure and break their tactical cohesion. 2 hours into the operation, a new threat emerged. A single figure moving with different purpose than the others, climbing not toward Sidewinder's position but toward Ridge 13 itself. Leah adjusted her scope, studying this new player. Unlike the others, he moved with the confident precision of someone who knew exactly where he was going. He wasn't searching, he was pursuing. With growing unease, she recognized the tactical approach of a counter-sniper specialist, someone who understood her methods well enough to predict her position, someone who knew about Ridge 13. She shifted her aim, centering the crosshairs on this new threat. An easy shot at 1,800 meters. But as her finger touched the trigger, the figure looked up directly toward her position and raised a hand in a gesture that froze her in place. He made a series of deliberate hand signals, military signs, but not American. Soviet-era Spetsnaz combat signals that she recognized from intelligence briefings. I know who you are, Falcon. A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain cold ran through her. Only one person could know both her identity and her position, whoever had betrayed Valkyrie 13 years ago. The figure continued signaling. We have unfinished business. You and I. Leah kept her crosshairs centered on his chest, but didn't fire. This was the moment she had both dreaded and longed for since watching her team die. The architect of that massacre was finally within her sights. The figure made one final signal before disappearing behind a rock formation. Your new friends will die like the others. Rage and memory threatened to overwhelm her professional discipline. For a dangerous moment, Leah considered abandoning her mission to pursue this ghost from her past, to finish what had started 13 years ago. But below, Sidewinder team was still fighting for survival, still depending on her protection to reach extraction. Roger's voice seemed to whisper from the wind, "The mission is what matters. Everything else is just ego." With disciplined precision, Leah refocused on Sidewinder's route, identifying and eliminating the remaining threats along their path to Extraction Point Whiskey. She would deal with her personal demons after ensuring these men made it home. The counter-sniper didn't reappear, having delivered his message and vanished into the landscape. But Leah knew he was still out there, watching, waiting, just as she had been all these years. For now, she had 6 lives to save. The reckoning would come later. Team Sidewinder moved through the difficult terrain with the synchronized efficiency that made Navy SEALs legendary. Despite multiple firefights, dwindling ammunition, and the unexpected route change, they maintained tactical discipline. Master Chief Ryan Foster took point, guiding them through a narrow pass that would eventually lead to Extraction Point Whiskey. The mysterious rock slide had forced them to abandon their original plan, but Foster recognized it for what it was: deliberate intervention. Same guardian angel as before, he had told Wade when they first discovered the blocked path. Someone's looking out for us. Now, as they approached a clearing that would leave them exposed for nearly 200 meters, Foster called a halt. Something felt wrong. The tactical instincts honed through decades of combat were screaming warnings. "Hold position," he ordered. "Wade, what do you see?" The team leader studied the open ground ahead, then the surrounding ridgelines. "Killing zone. Too exposed." Foster nodded. "Exactly what I'm thinking." "Options?" Wade asked. Foster checked their position against his terrain map. "We're 3 clicks from extraction. Birds on standby for our signal." "We could wait for dark," Reeves suggested. "Negative. Stormfront's moving in. Hilo won't be able to reach us after 1600 hours. Kate Vega, who had been studying the western approach through her scope, suddenly tensed. "Movement. 400 meters. Ridgeline." All rifles swung in that direction, but Foster raised his hand. "Hold fire." Through his high-powered optics, he observed a single figure silhouetted against the sky for just a moment before disappearing. The shape was unmistakable, a sniper with a spotter scope surveying the valley floor. "Is that our guardian?" Wade asked, his own rifle trained on the spot. "Let's find out," Foster replied, then made a deliberate hand signal that any trained sniper would recognize request guidance. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then, startling everyone, a single shot struck the ground 10 meters ahead of their position. Not a miss a message. The round kicked up dirt in a precise spot, then ricocheted off a rock face, leaving a clear mark. Foster studied the impact point and the angle of the shot. "Incredible," he muttered. "What is it?" Wade demanded. "They're showing us a route." Foster pointed to where the bullet had struck and then ricocheted. "That angle. They're telling us to hug the western cliff face. It's a blind spot for anyone watching the clearing." "You sure about that, Master Chief?" Foster checked the position, once more calculating angles and fields of fire with the practiced eye of a veteran operator. "That shot came from Ridge 13. No way that's enemy fire. They're helping us." Wade hesitated. "That's a hell of a risk based on a single shot." "Sometimes one shot is all you get," Foster replied, already moving toward the western cliff face. "Besides, whoever's up there has saved us twice already. I'm inclined to trust them one more time." The team followed, hugging the cliff face exactly as indicated. Sure enough, the route provided concealment from any observation points covering the clearing. They moved rapidly, maintaining tight intervals until reaching the far side safely. "Son of a bitch," Wade breathed. "That actually worked." Foster merely nodded, then gestured toward the final approach to Extraction Point Whiskey. "One more click. Stay tight. Our friend's still watching." As if to confirm his words, 2 more shots rang out from the distant ridge, not aimed at them, but at something ahead. Seconds later, they heard the unmistakable sound of bodies falling. "Move," Foster ordered. Understanding instantly that their guardian had just eliminated threats in their path, the team sprinted forward, weapons ready. They passed two dead fighters each with a single shot to the head, bodies still warm. Jesus, Reeves whispered. Those shots came from at least 2,000 meters out. More like 2,500, Foster corrected. In crosswind conditions. They reached the extraction zone with no further contact. Foster established a defensive perimeter while Wade called in the helicopter. Within minutes, the distinctive sound of rotor blades cut through the mountain air. As the Black Hawk descended, Foster took one last look toward Ridge 13, now partly obscured by the approaching storm front. He raised his fist in the age-old salute of warriors acknowledging each other across the battlefield. Whether his guardian angel saw the gesture, he would never know. But as the team boarded the helicopter and lifted away from the valley that had nearly claimed them, Foster knew with absolute certainty that whoever had watched over them would remain behind. Some guardians never leave their posts. Leah watched through her scope as the helicopter lifted away, carrying Sidewinder to safety. Only when the aircraft disappeared into the clouds did she finally relax her vigilance, allowing herself to feel the exhaustion, cold, and pain she had been suppressing for hours. Her hands, cut and bleeding from the climb, trembled slightly as she secured her rifle. Her mission was complete. 6 men who would have died were going home. She retrieved the satellite phone from her pack, dialing the only program number. Morrison answered immediately. Confirmation. Package secure. She reported, her voice rough from hours of silence. Sidewinder is airborne. A pause, then casualties. None on our side. Another pause. And you? Still here. Extraction plan. Leah glanced at the approaching storm, calculating her options. I'll make my way to secondary rendezvous. 24 hours. Roger that. Morrison's voice softened slightly. Good work, Ms. Keller. Thank you, Colonel. She was about to end the call when Morrison added, There's something else you should know. Sir, we intercepted communications after the first shots were fired. They knew about Ridge 13. They were expecting you. Leah's mind flashed to the counter-sniper who had signaled her. I know, I made contact. Visual confirmation. Negative, but he knew Falcon's designation. And Spetsnaz hand signals. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Korvik. Possible. He's former Spetsnaz. Right age, right background. This changes things, Morrison said gravely. Korvik has been hunting Falcon for years. If he's made a positive ID, I'll be careful. More than careful. If he knows who you are, he won't stop coming, ever. Leah watched the storm clouds roll toward her position, bringing darkness and cover. Let him come. That's not the mission. No. Her voice hardened. But it's my promise. Before Morrison could respond, she ended the call and stowed the phone. The temperature was dropping rapidly as the storm intensified. She needed to move before the conditions became impassable. As she packed her equipment, Leah noticed something half buried in the rocky soil near her position, something that hadn't been there when she arrived. A brass shell casing, not one of hers. This was from a Russian SVD Dragunov rifle, the preferred weapon of Spetsnaz snipers. And etched into its side was a crude falcon symbol with a line drawn through it. A message. A promise of retribution. Korvik had been here on Ridge 13 itself while she was focused on saving Sidewinder. Close enough to leave his calling card, but choosing not to take the shot. Because this wasn't about killing. It was about the game. The hunt. Leah pocketed the casing alongside her own spent shells. Then, with a final look at the valley where Valkyrie had fallen and Sidewinder had survived, she began her descent. The storm enveloped Ridge 13 in swirling snow and darkness, erasing all traces of the Guardian, who had once again saved lives from its summit. But unlike before this time, Leah wasn't fleeing in desperate survival. This time she was hunting. Colonel Morrison stood at the window of his office, watching rain trace familiar patterns on the glass. The same storm that had earlier provided cover for Leah's operation had followed the jet stream eastward, arriving at Fort Liberty almost exactly when she had calculated it would. The woman's precision extended even to weather patterns. Behind him, Major Bradford reviewed the after-action report they were preparing for Director Hayes. The official version would state that Sidewinder team had encountered unexpected terrain obstacles that forced them to divert to secondary extraction. No mention of Ridge 13 phantom snipers or analysts who disappeared on family emergencies. Some truths weren't meant for official records. Sir, the Bradford said, looking up from his tablet. Sidewinders inbound, 30 minutes out. Morrison nodded. Good. Have medical standing by for evaluation, then immediate debrief. I want to hear their perspective before we finalize the report. And Keller's role remains classified. As far as anyone is concerned, she's still on personal leave. Bradford hesitated. Sir, with respect, if Korvik has identified her, she's in extreme danger. Shouldn't we recall her immediately? Morrison turned from the window, his expression unreadable. Major, there's something you need to understand about Falcon. She doesn't run from danger. Never has. But against Korvik, former Spetsnaz, with a personal vendetta, the man's a ghost himself. So is she. Morrison's confidence was absolute. Trust me, if anyone can handle Adrian Korvik, it's Sarah Keller. Bradford wasn't convinced, based on a mission from 13 years ago. Based on what I know about her. Morrison moved to his desk, unlocking a drawer with his personal code. From it, he withdrew a small leather pouch. Have you ever wondered why we called her Falcon? Without waiting for an answer, Morrison emptied the pouch onto his desk. 7 brass shell casings rolled across the surface. These were recovered from various operations between 2009 and 2018. Different theaters, different targets, all impossible shots that saved American lives. He picked up one casing, examining the precise marks etched into its surface, each one personally engraved with a set of coordinates and left where it would be found by recovering forces. Bradford leaned closer. I don't understand. The coordinates aren't from the missions where they were found. They're from Operation Valkyrie, the exact locations where each member of her team fell. Morrison set the casing down gently. 7 shells, 1 for each team member, including herself. Why leave them like that? Because she was sending a message. To herself, to her fallen teammates, and to whoever betrayed them. Morrison gathered the casings, returning them to the pouch. Keller doesn't need extraction, Major. She's been planning this confrontation for 13 years. Before Bradford could respond, a message alert sounded on Morrison's secure terminal. The colonel entered his authentication and read the incoming text, his expression darkening. What is it? Bradford asked. Intelligence intercept. Phantom cell communications. Morrison looked up, his eyes hard. They've confirmed Falcon's identity. They know she's Sarah Keller. How? They have someone inside Fort Liberty, a source with access to personnel files and Project Kestrel. Bradford paled. A mole. Here. Morrison nodded grimly, which means Korvik knows exactly who he's hunting now, and where to find her when she comes home. We need to warn her. Already did, but she's gone dark for the extraction journey. Morrison stared at the satellite image still displayed on his wall monitor, the Morrow Valley, where one woman now moved through a landscape of enemies who knew her name, her face, and her mission. She's on her own, Major, just like before. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like distant gunfire. Somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, Sarah Leah Keller was facing the storm and the ghosts of her past. And at Fort Liberty, the traitor who had compromised her identity was still walking free, preparing for her return. The hunt had only just begun. The Black Hawk helicopter carrying the team's Sidewinder descended through rain-heavy clouds, touching down on Fort Liberty's landing pad with a precision that belied the storm's fury. Medical teams rushed forward, but were waved off by Master Chief Foster. His team was exhausted, dehydrated, and bearing minor injuries, but they could walk off the aircraft under their own power. That mattered to men like these. Colonel Morrison stood at the edge of the landing zone, rain soaking his uniform, as he watched the 6 operators disembark. Their faces told the story that reports never could, the hollow-eyed stare of men who had accepted death only to be unexpectedly reprieved. Foster approached, rendering a sharp salute despite his exhaustion. Mission completed, sir. Target data recovered. Morrison returned the salute. Welcome home, Master Chief. Your team performed admirably under impossible circumstances. Not impossible, Foster corrected, his voice low enough that only Morrison could hear. Just needed the right guardian angel. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Debrief in 1 hour, Morrison said louder. After medical clears you. Foster nodded, then hesitated. Sir, there's something you should know about Ridge 13. Later, Master Chief, in private. As Team Sidewinder moved toward the medical facility, Morrison turned to find Major Bradford approaching, sheltered under an umbrella. They all made it, Bradford observed, relief evident in his voice. Thanks to her. Any word from our asset? Morrison shook his head. Nothing since initial extraction confirmation. She's maintaining communication blackout until she reaches safe territory. And our internal situation? Unchanged. Security protocols upgraded. Access to personnel files restricted to command level only. It won't be enough, Bradford said, glancing around the busy base. If the mole has the access, we suspect they'll know she's coming back. They'll be ready. So will we, Morrison replied, watching Team Sidewinder disappear into the medical building. In the meantime, I want every communication from this base monitored and every transmission, official or otherwise. Sir, that's thousands of every single one. Morrison's tone left no room for argument. Somewhere in that data is our traitor, and I want them found before Keller returns. Bradford nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Yes, sir. As they walked toward the command building, Morrison added, and Bradford, have the armory prepare that M14 again. Something tells me she's going to want it when she gets back. 3,000 miles away in a remote safe house near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, Leah Keller sat motionless in darkness. Her body showed the toll of the mission cuts on her hands from the climb, bruises from the descent, extreme fatigue etched into her features. But her eyes remained alert, focused on the satellite phone resting on the table before her. The safe house was one of dozens established by U.S. intelligence for operations too sensitive for official channels. Basic but secure reinforced doors, blackout windows, emergency supplies, and most importantly, anonymity. The phone chirped once, not a call but a secure text. Coordinates followed by a time, 0200. Extraction, 4 hours from now. Leah rose and began methodical preparation. First, weapons check. Her personal sidearm, a modified Sig Sauer P226, received careful attention. Then equipment inventory, communications gear, survival essentials, identification documents. Everything organized with military precision, muscle memory from years of operations. As she worked, her mind processed the events on Ridge 13. The counter-sniper, almost certainly Adrian Korvik himself, had tracked her to the exact firing position. Not by chance or skill alone. He had known where to look, which meant the intelligence leak went beyond Fort Liberty's current operations. Someone had access to the classified Valkyrie files. Someone who knew exactly who Sarah Leah Keller really was. The betrayal of Valkyrie hadn't been a one-time event. It was ongoing, perpetrated by someone still active within military intelligence. Leah checked her watch, 2,300 hours. 3 hours until extraction. Time enough for one unauthorized communication. She assembled a specialized transmitter from components concealed within her gear, a device unknown to official channels built to specifications Roger Hollister had taught her years ago. Old technology immune to modern monitoring systems precisely because of its antiquated design. Using a one-time cipher memorized long ago, she encoded a brief message and transmitted it on a frequency used by only 2 people in the world. Then she disassembled the device, scattering its components to make it unidentifiable. Message sent, she returned to waiting, her face betraying nothing of the storm building inside her. 13 years of patience were about to culminate in a reckoning. The next phase of the hunt had begun. In Fort Liberty's secure briefing room, Foster sat alone with Morrison, the official debrief completed 20 minutes earlier. Now came the conversation, too sensitive for reports or witnesses. Ridge 13, Morrison prompted. Foster leaned forward, his voice low despite the room's security. Someone was up there, sir. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Elaborate. Precision fire at extreme range. Perfect target selection, always the command element first, then communications, then heavy weapons. Classic force recon sniper doctrine. Foster's eyes narrowed. But better than anyone I've ever seen. Ever. Morrison remained expressionless. Your team was lucky. This wasn't luck, Colonel. This was something else. Foster hesitated. When we were pinned down before the first shots came from the ridge, Wade swore he heard someone whisper, "She's here," like they knew, like they were expecting her. Her female shooter. Has to be. The shell casings we found by the extraction point, they had a symbol etched into them. A falcon. Morrison's poker face nearly broke. You found casings, 2 of them, left deliberately for us to find, I think. Foster reached into his pocket and extracted a brass shell, sliding it across the table. Figured you'd want to see this. Morrison picked up the casing, examining the precise etching of Falcon in flight with the coordinates of Ridge 13 beneath it. She's never done this before, he murmured almost to himself. Sir, Morrison set down the casing. Nothing, Master Chief? Anything else? Just one thing. Foster met Morrison's eyes directly. Your new analyst, Keller. She disappeared right before our exfil window, and she knew that valley better than our own intelligence officers. Are you asking me a question, Master Chief? I'm offering an observation, sir, and my gratitude. If she was our guardian angel, I'd like to thank her personally. Morrison considered his response carefully. Ms. Keller is on family leave. When she returns, I'll pass along your appreciation for her technical support. Foster nodded, understanding the game. Of course, sir. Her technical support was invaluable. As Foster rose to leave, Morrison added, One last thing, Master Chief. This conversation never happened. What conversation, sir? The door closed behind Foster, leaving Morrison alone with the etched shell casing. He studied the marking, recognizing it as new, different from the 7 casings already in his collection. This wasn't just a signature. It was a message. She was finally ready to end this. The unmarked transport jet touched down at a private airfield 30 miles from Fort Liberty at 0430 hours, 3 days after Team Sidewinder's return. No welcoming committee awaited the single passenger who disembarked. No transportation stood ready. Exactly as Leah had requested, she walked from the airfield to the adjacent truck stop where a prepaid rental car awaited under a false name. The elderly attendant barely glanced at her identification before handing over the keys. Dawn was breaking as Leah drove the final miles to Fort Liberty, her mind focused on the coming confrontation. Not with Phantom Cell, not yet. First came the traitor within their own ranks. The base was quiet in the early morning hours, shift changes creating brief security gaps that she exploited with practiced ease. Her first destination wasn't command or her assigned quarters, but the secure communications center in the basement of Building C. Access required dual authentication, physical ID, plus biometric confirmation. Leah used neither. Instead, she located the maintenance access panel identified in the building schematics she had memorized months earlier. 3 minutes of careful work bypassed the security system, allowing her entry to the climate-controlled server room adjacent to the main communications hub. There she connected a specialized device to the network backbone, a passive monitoring system that would record all data without detection. This was not standard protocol. This was hunting. Task complete, she exited the same way she had entered, leaving no trace of her presence. Now to establish her official return. She checked in at the main security desk at 0700 hours, presenting her credentials as if she had just arrived. The duty officer processed her return from emergency leave without suspicion. Colonel Morrison asked to be notified when you returned, he informed her. Shall I call his office? I'll report in personally, Leah replied, after I've had a chance to clean up. Her quarters were exactly as she had left them, austere and impersonal. No photographs, no mementos, nothing that couldn't be abandoned at a moment's notice. The habit of a lifetime spent ready to disappear. She showered quickly, changing into her analyst uniform, then placed a secure call to Morrison's private line. You're back, he answered, skipping formalities, officially as of 30 minutes ago. Status, operational, package delivered. The listening device was in place. Good. Team Sidewinder returned safely. Your technical guidance was instrumental. Glad to hear it. Has there been any progress on our other matter? A pause. Nothing concrete. Bradford's been monitoring all communications, but it's like searching for a needle in a field of haystacks. I may have a magnet, Leah replied. When can we meet? My office, 1 hour. Morrison's office was secured against electronic surveillance, one of the few places on base where confidential conversations could occur without risk of interception. He dismissed his aide and activated the privacy protocols before Leah arrived. When she entered, he was struck by the transformation. Gone was the quiet, unremarkable analyst. In her place stood a woman with the focused intensity of a predator. She had dropped the pretense. You look like hell, he observed. Ridge 13 isn't a spa retreat. Despite the situation, Morrison almost smiled. Sit down before you fall down. She complied, her movements betraying the exhaustion she had been suppressing. What's our status? Team Sidewinder is back debriefed and officially on stand down. The operation is being classified as a partial success. Data recovered, all personnel returned safely. No mention of external intervention. And unofficially, Master Chief Foster knows or suspects he found these. Morrison placed the etched shell casing on his desk. Care to explain? Leah picked up the casing, examining her own handiwork. Insurance. Against what? Deniability. She set it down carefully. If something happened to me on that mountain, I wanted proof of who I was, what I did. After 13 years of staying invisible, that's a significant change in protocol. Leah's eyes met his. Everything's changed. Korvik was there on Ridge 13. He left me a message. Morrison tensed. What kind of message? A Dragunov casing with a crossed-out falcon. He knows who I am, and he wants me to know he's coming. That confirms our intelligence. Phantom cell communications intercepted after your operation explicitly mentioned Sarah Keller and Falcon 327 as the same person. Morrison leaned forward. Someone here betrayed you. I know. That's why I've initiated Ghost Protocol. Morrison stared at her. Ghost Protocol was deactivated after Valkyrie. Those contingencies don't exist anymore. They do for me. Leah's expression was unyielding. I've been maintaining the network since 2010, separate from official channels. That's a violation of at least 6 regulations. Necessary violations, as it turns out. She produced a small device from her pocket, sliding it across the desk. This contains the monitoring package I installed this morning. It will intercept and record all communications from this base, flagging anything related to Phantom Cell, Valkyrie, or Falcon. Morrison picked up the device, studying it with a mixture of professional admiration and concern. You know I can't officially sanction this. I know. That's why I didn't ask permission. If you're caught, I won't be. The certainty in her voice gave him pause. This wasn't the traumatized survivor he had protected 13 years ago. This was someone who had transformed pain into purpose, fear into focused determination. What do you need from me? He asked finally. Operational clearance for a small training exercise. Ridge 13 simulation. I need access to the special weapons repository and 3 days of unmonitored preparation. You're setting a trap. I'm finishing what started 13 years ago. Morrison considered his options. Official protocol demanded he shut down her unauthorized operation immediately. But official protocol hadn't saved Valkyrie team. It hadn't identified the traitor who continued to compromise operations. And it wouldn't stop Adrian Korvik. 3 days, he agreed. After that, with or without results, we go official. Full team, proper authorization. Understood. As she rose to leave, Morrison added one more thing. Master Chief Foster has requested to meet the technical analyst who provided such detailed terrain guidance. Seems he wants to express his gratitude personally. That's not necessary. Maybe not, but he left something for you. Morrison opened his desk drawer and removed a small object wrapped in cloth. Found it at Extraction Point Whiskey. Leah unwrapped the bundle to find a SEAL Team Challenge coin inscribed with Team Sidewinder's insignia and a single word, gratitude. For a moment, her carefully maintained composure faltered. She closed her fingers around the coin, the simple gesture of appreciation somehow more affecting than any formal recognition. Tell him, she paused, searching for words. Tell him technical analysts appreciate good operators who follow terrain guidance. Morrison nodded. I'll pass that along. The special weapons repository was housed in a secure wing of the armory, accessible only to those with specialized clearance. Sergeant Major Chambers greeted Leah with a knowing nod when she presented Morrison's authorization. Figured you'd be back for this, he said, leading her to a reinforced door at the rear of the facility. Been keeping it ready. Inside lay weapons too specialized for general inventory, prototype systems, modified equipment, and historical pieces maintained for specific operational requirements. Chambers proceeded to a locked cabinet and entered his access code. M14 EBR as requested, he announced, revealing the rifle Leah had carried on Ridge 13, plus the customized scope package and match-grade ammunition. Colonel Morrison authorized the full kit. Leah approached the weapon with the reverence some might reserve for religious artifacts. Her fingers traced the familiar contours of the rifle that had saved her life and now the lives of Team Sidewinder. I've also prepared this, Chambers added, opening another case to reveal a modified Barrett M107A1 50 caliber sniper system, anti-material capability, for your training exercise. The weapon was designed to disable armored vehicles at extreme ranges, overkill for conventional training. Both knew this was no ordinary exercise. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Chambers watched her inspect the Barrett with professional precision. You know, in 30 years of service, I've outfitted a lot of operators. Best ones never talk about what they do. Just come in, get their gear, and vanish until the mission's complete. Leah glanced up at him. Way I see it, he continued, some guardians work best in the shadows. Not my job to shine a light on them, just to make sure they have what they need when they need it. I appreciate that. One more thing. Chambers reached into his pocket and produced a small metal object, an old-style dog tag with no name, only a number 327. Found this with the M14 when it came back from theater. Figured its owner might want it returned. Leah stared at the tag, momentarily transported back to the day she had deliberately left it behind on Ridge 13, a symbolic burial for the person she had been. Keep it, she said quietly. Some things belong to the mountain. Chambers nodded, returning the tag to his pocket without comment. He understood monuments to the fallen when he saw them. Your equipment will be delivered to Training Range Charlie as requested, he said, returning to professional matters. Anything else you need, you let me know. Actually, there is one thing. Leah's tone shifted subtly. I need eyes on all requisition orders from this armory for the past 6 months, particularly any unusual patterns or off-hours access. Chambers didn't ask why. I'll have the logs delivered to your secure terminal by 1800 hours. Thank you, Sergeant Major. As she turned to leave, Chambers added, for what it's worth, good hunting. The next 36 hours passed in methodical preparation. Leah divided her time between 3 activities: monitoring communications intercepted by her unauthorized system, analyzing armory requisition patterns, and preparing the specialized equipment for her training exercise. She maintained her cover as a technical analyst, appearing at scheduled briefings and submitting routine reports. To casual observers, Sarah Keller had simply returned from family leave and resumed her duties. But beneath this ordinary surface, the hunt accelerated. The communications monitoring yielded results faster than expected. At 02:17 hours on her second night back, a transmission was intercepted encrypted, but using a protocol her system was specifically designed to detect. The outgoing message contained 2 critical phrases flagged in her search parameters: Falcon confirmed and operational schedule acquired. The origin point was Building D officers' quarters. The system couldn't identify the specific sender, but it narrowed the field considerably. Simultaneously, her analysis of armory requisitions revealed an anomaly: small but consistent discrepancies in ammunition inventories, particularly for specialized 7.62mm match-grade rounds, the same type used by her M14 and similar precision weapons. Someone was stockpiling sniper ammunition off the books. The pattern converged around specific personnel with access to both communication systems and armory requisitions. As Leah cross-referenced security clearances against building assignments, the list of suspects narrowed to 3 individuals. Major Thomas Bradford, Colonel Morrison's executive officer; Captain Eric Winters, communications security officer; Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed, senior intelligence liaison. One of these 3 was feeding information to Phantom Cell. One had betrayed Valkyrie 13 years ago, and one was preparing to betray her again. Time to accelerate the endgame. Morrison studied the data Leah had presented, his expression darkening as the implications became clear. Bradford, he said, disbelief evident in his voice. He's been with me for 5 years. I trust him with operations daily. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling, Leah replied. His access pattern matches the transmission times. His security clearance gives him visibility into classified operations. And he was stationed at Bagram when Valkyrie was compromised. So were 50 other officers. But only one is now positioned as your XO with direct access to everything connected to Project Kestrel. Leah's voice remained neutral, analytical. I'm not saying it's definitely Bradford, but he's one of 3 possibilities. Morrison paced the length of his office. What about the others? Winters has communications access, certainly. And Reed's intelligence background would give him the contacts. Exactly why I haven't moved against any of them yet. We need certainty. And your plan to get it? Leah laid out a topographical map of the training range. The trap is set for tomorrow night. Ridge 13 simulation exercise as authorized. I'll be in position here ostensibly conducting long-range target evaluation. And the real purpose? To feed controlled information through each suspect. Different details, different channels. When Phantom Cell responds, we'll know which leak they're acting on. Morrison studied the map. This is thin. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong about the leak, Leah interrupted. The only question is which one. And if Korvik personally responds to your bait, her eyes met his, cold and determined. That's what I'm counting on. Morrison recognized the look, the same focused intensity he had seen in the best operators before high-risk missions. The calm certainty of someone who had accepted all possible outcomes, including the worst. You're using yourself as bait, he said flatly. It's the most efficient approach. It's suicide if Korvik brings his team. He won't. Leah's certainty was absolute. This is personal for him. He'll want to take Falcon himself, prove he's the better hunter. His ego demands it. Morrison shook his head slowly. I've lost enough people in this operation, Keller. I won't lose you, too. With respect, Colonel, that's not your decision to make. Her voice softened slightly. This was always going to end this way. From the moment I crawled off that mountain 13 years ago, carrying the names of my team and a promise I made to their memories. For a long moment, neither spoke. The weight of history, both shared and separate, filled the space between them. Finally, Morrison sighed. At least take backup. Let me assign Foster's team for perimeter security. No, any change to the approved exercise parameters would alert our mole. I need them to believe I'm isolated and vulnerable. Because you will be. Leah almost smiled. Not entirely, I'll have an old friend with me. She gestured to the weapon cases prepared for the operation. We understand each other. Morrison recognized the futility of further argument. 24 hours. Then I send in a quick reaction force, authorized or not. That's fair. As she gathered her materials to leave, Morrison added, Bradford's accompanying me to Washington tomorrow for a Pentagon briefing. We fly out at 0900, return late evening. If he's your mole, he won't be on base during your operation. Then we'll know it's one of the others. And if it is Bradford, then I'll deal with him when you return. The quiet certainty in her voice made Morrison grateful that Sarah Keller was on their side. He had seen what happened to those who earned her focused attention as adversaries. They didn't remain adversaries for long. The training range sprawled across the eastern edge of Fort Liberty, providing varied terrain for everything from basic marksmanship to complex tactical simulations. Range Charlie, the furthest from the main base, featured a rugged ridgeline specifically designed to mimic mountainous combat environments. By 1500 hours, Leah had established her position on the simulated Ridge 13, a rocky outcropping offering commanding views of the entire range. Her equipment was arranged with methodical precision, the Barrett M107A1 as primary, M14 EBR as secondary observation and communication gear distributed for optimal access. To any observer, it appeared to be a standard long-range marksmanship exercise. The necessary authorizations were filed, safety protocols, acknowledged range boundaries established. But Leah wasn't preparing for target practice. She was setting a stage. Throughout the day, she had carefully fed different information to each suspect. To Captain Winters, she had mentioned adjusting communications protocols for the exercise. To Lieutenant Colonel Reed, she had requested intelligence assessments of similar training configurations. And before his departure to Washington, she had asked Major Bradford to review her final range parameters, noting the extended hours she planned to utilize well past sunset. Now she waited to see which piece of information would reach Phantom Cell and through which channel. As the afternoon progressed, she conducted actual marksmanship drills, establishing a rhythm of fire that would register normally on the range monitoring systems. Between firing sequences, Anina, she maintained surveillance of the surrounding terrain, alert for any approach. At 1742 hours, her communication unit signaled an incoming transmission on the secure channel. Kestrel actual to lookout, status check, Morrison using their established codename protocol. Lookout copies, all green at this station. Leah kept her voice neutral, aware that communications could be monitored. Weather clear, visibility excellent. Confirmed. Be advised, Washington rotation complete ahead of schedule. Eagle 1 returning to nest by 1900. Translation. Morrison and Bradford were returning early from the Pentagon. Understood. Will adjust observation schedule accordingly. The communication ended, leaving Leah to process this development. Bradford's early return complicated her scenario. If he was the mole, he would now have opportunity to monitor her operation directly or potentially interfere. She needed to accelerate the timeline. At 1820 hours, as shadows lengthened across the training range, her surveillance detected movement at the perimeter. Two figures moving with tactical discipline across the terrain. Their approach utilized natural cover, minimizing exposure, professional, methodical advance. Not range personnel, not security patrol, hunters. Leah adjusted her observation scope, studying their equipment and movement pattern. Not military standard issue. Private tactical gear configured for stealth operations. One carried what appeared to be a Dragunov SVD rifle, Russian design favored by Eastern European special forces. Korvik's signature weapon. She allowed herself a moment of cold satisfaction. The trap was working. Now to identify which information channel had brought them here. Maintaining her position, Leah continued apparent training activities while tracking the approaching figures. They split up, moving to establish a classic pincer approach, one circling to her west, one to the east. Standard counter-sniper tactics against a fixed position. They were good, professional, disciplined. But she was better. At 1835 hours, her communication unit signaled again. Lookout, be advised. Security alert at Building Delta. Communications officer reports unauthorized access attempts to your exercise parameters. Building Delta housed the communications center, Captain Winter's domain. Confirmed actual. Continuing observation mission. So, not Winters, who was apparently detecting the security breach rather than causing it. That left Bradford or Reed. The approaching figures had reached their final positions approximately 300 meters out, establishing firing angles. They were waiting for full darkness before making their final move. Leah made a deliberate adjustment to her rifle, creating visible movement at her position, signaling apparent obliviousness to their presence. Bait carefully presented. At 1842 hours, a third figure appeared approaching from the south with less tactical discipline than the others. Military posture, standard issue gear. Through her scope, Leah identified Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Reed. The pieces clicked into place. Reed, with his intelligence background and access to classified records. Reed, who had been stationed at multiple locations where Phantom Cell had operated successfully. Reed now moving to join forces with the Phantom Cell operators targeting her position. The traitor revealed. Leah sent a coded confirmation to Morrison, then prepared for the confrontation. The Barrett was loaded with specialized rounds, its substantial weight anchored against the ridge. The M14 was positioned as backup, ready for closer engagement. Full darkness descended at 1915 hours. The three hostiles began their final approach. Leah centered the Barrett's crosshairs on the eastern attacker, the one carrying the Dragunov. Even in the gathering darkness, the thermal imaging system provided perfect clarity. The distance, 317 meters, a simple shot for a weapon of this caliber. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, prepared for the moment when observation became engagement. Years of training had taught her the perfect balance point, the precise pressure that separated potential from kinetic energy. Through her scope, she watched the eastern figure make a hand signal to the others. 3 fingers raised, then 2, then 1. The countdown to their attack. She exhaled slowly, centering herself in the moment that had been 13 years in the making. "For Valkyrie," she whispered, and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett's report shattered the evening silence, the massive 50 caliber round traveling at supersonic velocity toward its target. The eastern figure dropped instantly, the specialized round designed not to kill, but to incapacitate, striking the shoulder of his weapon arm. Before the echo faded, Leah had shifted aim and fired twice more. The western attacker went down, his leg shattered by another precisely placed shot. Only Reed remained standing, frozen in shock at the sudden reversal of their ambush. Leah switched to her command frequency. "Kestrel actual, lookout, 3 tangos down, 2 unknown, 1 confirmed as Reed. Request immediate security team. Security en route, ETA 3 minutes. Status, green, maintaining overwatch." She kept her scope trained on Reed, who had raised his hands in surrender, his face a mask of frustrated rage. The other two hostiles remained down disabled, but conscious their weapons kicked beyond reach. Tactical perfection. 3 targets neutralized without fatalities, evidence preserved, conspiracy exposed. Except something wasn't right. The Eastern attacker, the one with the Dragunov, wasn't behaving like a wounded hostile. Despite his injury, he had managed to roll onto his back, looking directly up at her position on the ridge. Then inexplicably, he began to laugh. Through her scope, Leah studied his face, illuminated now by the rising moon. Not Korvik, a decoy. The realization came a fraction of a second before instinct screamed a warning. She rolled left just as a shot impacted where her head had been splintering the rock behind her firing position. A fourth hostile. Behind her. The real hunter. Leah scrambled for cover as a second shot struck near her position. The angle was all wrong. The shooter had somehow flanked her, approaching from the supposedly secured rear slope of the ridge, a route that should have been impossible without inside knowledge of the range configuration. Look out to actual, fourth hostile on the ridge. I am compromised. Repeat, compromised. No response. Her communications had been jammed. Calculating angles and approach vectors. Leah moved laterally across the ridge, keeping low. The M14 was still at her primary position, but her sidearm was secured in its holster. She drew the weapon, continuing her evasive movement. Another shot struck nearby, closer this time. The shooter was adjusting, tracking her movement pattern. Professional, methodical, Korvik. How had he gotten behind her? The range security protocols should have prevented any approach from that direction. Unless there was a second traitor, someone with direct access to the range security systems. Someone who had left for Washington but returned early. Bradford. The pieces rearranged themselves in her mind. Not one mole, but two. Reed and Bradford working together, positioned to compromise operations from multiple angles. The perfect intelligence trap. She needed to change tactics. Evasion wouldn't work against a shooter of Korvik's caliber, not with limited cover and dwindling options. The security team was minutes away, but she might not have minutes. Time to become the hunter again. Leah moved decisively toward a rock formation, providing momentary concealment. There she removed her outer tactical vest, the primary visual target in the darkness, and placed it strategically to suggest a hiding position. Then she circled wide, utilizing her intimate knowledge of ridge firing positions. If Korvik was behind her, he would be advancing from the north face. The terrain there offered only 3 viable approaches, each with specific vulnerabilities. She chose her position carefully, using natural terrain to break up her silhouette. Then she waited, controlling her breathing, becoming part of the ridge itself. Seconds stretched into a full minute, 2 minutes. Then movement, a shadow detaching from shadows. Korvik approached her decoy position, with professional caution, his weapon at the ready. Even in the darkness, Leah could make out the distinctive profile of a man who had haunted her nightmares for 13 years. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the lethal grace of a predator. He paused 10 meters from the decoy, studying it with experienced eyes. Too experienced to fall for such a simple trick. "I know you're still here, Falcon," he called out, his voice carrying a thick Eastern European accent. "Still hiding, like on Ridge 13. Leah remained motionless, her sidearm trained on his position. 13 years I've hunted you," he continued, "the one who got away, the one who saw my face." He turned, slowly scanning the ridge. "Your team was good, very professional, but too trusting, like Americans always are." Leah's finger tightened fractionally on the trigger. "You think you're hunting me?" Korvik laughed softly. "Look around you, Falcon. Your communications are jammed. Your backup is delayed by a security incident at the main gate. And your commanding officer is currently discovering that his trusted Major Bradford has disappeared." He began moving again, circling toward her actual position with uncanny intuition. "We've been inside your operations for years, watching, waiting, learning your patterns." His voice hardened. "Did you really think you could trap me? Me, the man who destroyed Valkyrie." He was 20 meters away now, moving with the confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. "Your friends died, afraid, you know, calling for help that never came, begging for extraction." He was deliberately provoking her, trying to force an emotional response. "All except Hollister. He died cursing your name, blaming you for not covering their retreat. 15 meters. When I kill you, I'll complete my collection. One brass casing for each member of Valkyrie, all with little falcons scratched out. His smile was visible now in the moonlight. Poetic, don't you think? 10 meters. Within effective range for a guaranteed shot. Leah exhaled slowly, then spoke for the first time. There's just one problem with your plan, Korvik. He froze at the sound of her voice weapon swinging toward her position. You talk too much. Her first shot struck center mass, impacting his body armor, but staggering him backward. Her second and third found gaps in the protection, one to the shoulder, one to the upper thigh. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. Korvik went down hard, his weapon clattering away. Leah approached cautiously, keeping her sidearm trained on him. Valkyrie sends regards, she said quietly. Despite his wounds, Korvik laughed. You think this is the end? There will be others. We are everywhere. I'm counting on it. The sound of approaching vehicles reached them. The security team finally arriving, Leah maintained her aim on Korvik, unwilling to risk any final desperate move from the wounded hunter. Why, she asked the question that had haunted her for 13 years. Why Valkyrie? We were just a reconnaissance team. Korvik's smile was bloody. Because you saw what you weren't supposed to see. The caves, the weapons, the preparations. He coughed, grimacing in pain. We needed years to build our network. Valkyrie would have exposed everything too soon. So you killed them, my whole team. War is war, Falcon, nothing personal. His eyes glinted with malice. Until you made it personal. Until you became the ghost who kept interfering with our operations. Floodlights suddenly illuminated the ridge as security vehicles established a perimeter below. Radio calls echoed across the terrain, tactical teams deploying to secure the area. It's over, Korvik. He shook his head. It's never over. Cut off one head, two more appear. Bradford is gone. Reed is only one of many. The game continues. This isn't a game. Leah's voice was ice. It's a reckoning. Security personnel began ascending the ridge, their tactical lights sweeping the terrain. Moments later, Colonel Morrison appeared, moving with determined strides toward her position. Keller status. 4 tangos down, 3 at the base, 1 here. She kept her weapon trained on Korvik. Primary target secured. Morrison surveyed the scene, taking in the wounded Phantom Cell leader and the cold determination in Leah's eyes. Medical team is en route, he informed her. We have Reed in custody. Bradford has disappeared, likely had an extraction plan in place. Korvik confirms Reed was working with Bradford. There are others. Morrison nodded grimly. We'll find them, all of them. As the tactical team secured Korvik, Leah finally lowered her weapon. The adrenaline that had sustained her began to ebb, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You did it, Morrison said quietly. Valkyrie is avenged. She shook her head. Not avenged, honored. Morrison understood the distinction. This hadn't been about revenge, but about fulfilling the sacred obligation owed to fallen comrades. About ensuring their sacrifice meant something. What now, he asked. Leah looked out over the training range toward the distant lights of Fort Liberty. Somewhere out there, Bradford was running, other moles were hiding, and Phantom Cell was regrouping. Now we finish what we started, she replied. All of it. 3 weeks later, Colonel Morrison stood before the unmarked granite stone that had been placed on the simulated Ridge 13 at the training range. No ceremonies had accompanied its installation. No official recognition marked its significance. Just a simple stone bearing 6 names and a date, Operation Valkyrie 2009. He heard footsteps approaching and turned to find Master Chief Foster climbing the final meters to the ridgetop. Quite a view, Foster remarked, surveying the expansive training range. I can see why she chose this spot. Morrison nodded. Good fields of fire. Excellent concealment options. Reminiscent of the real Ridge 13. Have you heard from her? Not directly, Morrison replied. She's gone back to what she does best. After the operation that captured Korvik and exposed Reed's Sarah, Leah Keller had officially transferred to a classified assignment. Her personnel file was sealed, her movements restricted to need-to-know channels. Unofficially, she had disappeared once more into the shadow world, where guardians like her operated best. Bradford's still out there, Foster noted, for now, but he's being hunted by someone who doesn't give up, ever. Morrison's confidence was absolute. It's just a matter of time. They stood in silence for a moment, paying respects to the names engraved on the stone. Then Foster reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a brass shell casing with intricate etching. Found this on my doorstep this morning, he said, handing it to Morrison. No idea how it got there. The colonel examined the casing. Etched into its surface was a falcon in flight, surrounded by the words Guardian's Promise. Looks like she's still watching, Morrison said, returning the casing to Foster. Still keeping promises. Foster pocketed the memento. Think we'll ever see her again. Morrison gazed out over the training range toward the distant mountains beyond Fort Liberty. Somewhere out there, a Guardian moved silently through shadow, hunting those who threatened what she had sworn to protect. Most people won't, he replied. But those who need her most? A rare smile crossed his weathered features. They'll know she's there, even when they can't see her. As they descended from the ridge, leaving the memorial stone to its silent vigil, both men understood the truth that few ever recognize. Some Guardians never seek recognition. Some heroes never claim their titles. Some protectors remain forever in the shadows, watching over those who will never know their names. And some ridges, though they appear empty, never truly are.